Good morning and welcome to episode 252 of Silver Lining for Learning. I am joined by my co-host Chris Dede from Harvard, Kurt Bong from Indiana, Lydia Cow from Toronto. Today we are talking about empowering India's youth to shape tomorrow with guests Bhavna Parmar and Tanvi Negi from Quest Alliance. Um, Quest is is a good friend of our show. We have had Akash Sethi in episode 186, who heads Quest Alliance when we celebrated 4 years of Silver Lining for Learning. We are now celebrating we just celebrated 250 episodes and 5.5 years of doing this. Then we had in episode 140 Priyanka Krishna on 21st Century Learning. And then in episode 43, back in the day, Akash and Kiran Sethi, his aunt, who runs this wonderful school in Ahmedabad, joined us for designing for learners to take charge of their own learning. So today we have Bhavna and Tanvi talking about a new initiative, the Youth Future Studio at Quest Alliance. And Bhavna is a researcher designer working at the intersection of youth, digital cultures, and participatory futures. She has set up and currently leads the Youth Future Studio at Quest Alliance. Tanvi is the director of monitoring, evaluation, research at Quest Alliance. This work also has a podcast, which I strongly recommend. So at some point, you guys should plug that for sure. We can drop the link in our notes as well. And Bhavna, incidentally, also does some sort of, I don't know whether you call it journalism or I don't know how you define it, but has this wonderful piece that she wrote, which really blew me away. Partly because, and it's kind of interesting, I've known Bhavna for a few years. And one morning I'm just scrolling through and this headline pops up. I start reading it. It's about these girls being indoctrinated with sort of whatever misinformation or whatever you want to call it. And it's where I am from, Khurda, which is Bhubaneswar, where my parents had their home. And so I kept reading it. It was this deeply researched sort of look at how YouTube and other algorithms are transforming sort of the learning of young people in India. And then I go back, I said, who wrote this piece? And I'm like, oh my God, I know this person. So that's great. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about some of that work as well that you've been doing. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton on to the two of you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to this point, and then we will open it up to a broader set of question and answers. So I'm going to pass it to you, Bhavna, first, and then Tanvi, to you.
Thank you, Punya. Those were some kind words. So I've had an interesting journey as well, and I think I see your journey a little similar to mine. I started in engineering. I did electronics engineering as my bachelor's, and as you said, I think a lot of what you said about your engineering time, it aligns with me and my experience. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what they were teaching. Everything was not making sense to me. I was a creative person, so then I moved in my bachelor's itself. I moved to design and I started doing communications design. Then for 2 years, after engineering, I worked as a communication designer and I started doing a lot of like campaign design, etc. for these big NGOs like WWF, Save the Children, etc. And that made me feel like, okay, I have skills, but I also want to be on the ground and I want to see these stories, listen to these stories myself. Here I'm just sitting and designing reports and logos and etc. campaigns, but I want to be on the field and I think I can do something better with my time. That sort of moved me towards social design as a field. I did my master's in social design from this university called Ambedkar University in Delhi, which and they offer design in a liberal arts university, the only one I think at least I know in India and maybe the world as well at that time. And from there, I did a lot of projects in education. I was drawn to education for some reason, maybe because of my own experience. And from there, I came to Quest Alliance because I saw their work, I got to know about their work, and I, I I think I really wanted to be on the field, and Quest works in more than 11 states and different schools and vocational training institutes. And during my master's, I had an opportunity to go through Quest to Jharkhand and speak to students there. That sort of made me feel like, okay, this is where I want to work. And from there, I've been in Quest. It's been 4 years. And I'm still now I'm leading Youth Future Studio. So it's been a journey. It's been a long journey actually.
Thank you. Tanvi?
Um, I've been with Quest for about 7 years, but yeah, similar checkered uh, journey to get here. I'm an English major, I think, and after graduation, didn't know really what to do, and somehow ended up doing masters in business administration. Um, Again, similar to what Bhavna shared, didn't really know what I was doing there. Really enjoyed prepping for that exam and clearing that exam, but once was in the classroom, didn't really feel that I belonged there. At the same time, I think it did give me a start to my career, and I started working with a radio brand in Bombay. But I think 4 years into the journey, kind of realized that it felt a little shallow, and I really wanted to kind of maybe do work where I could find a little bit of purpose. So did make a choice to then switch to the development sector and try and see whether I could find a organization where I could use my skills, and ended up working in the Himalayan region for about 2 years with this NGO called Chirag, and that really was my learning ground. Learned a lot from the professionals there about integrated development, looking at things from a systems lens and not in isolation as such. And that can and after about 2 years of living there and working there, decided to kind of then see what else was out there in the development sector. So came to Bangalore, started working for a social enterprise which was looking to kind of support underserved communities with access to credit. And that was an interesting model, again, trying to bridge the gap between market failures and what mission-driven organizations would serve. Um, Spent almost 5 years with that organization, and then in 2019 is when I came to Quest Alliance. Again, I think the belief that education can solve for a lot of challenges that this country has, that young people face, and therefore that belief, especially in public education, is something that kind of drew me to the organization. And yeah, I've been here for almost more than 6 years now, leading the monitoring evaluation team at Quest. And yeah, it's been great so far, trying to kind of seeing things up close from what's happening with educators and in the classrooms, but also being trying to kind of understand what are the larger policy environments and how are they getting shaped. So that's been my journey so far.
Thank you. So I'll kick us off with a couple of questions, and then we can, let open it up to the other hosts as well. So, for people who are listening to the podcast, they really don't have a sort of a sense and context of what is feel like on the ground, let's say in Jharkhand or in Odisha or places like that. So maybe each of you can give us a little bit of a snapshot of what that work is like, what kinds of questions youth are sort of struggling with. And I think that will help us transition into the work that you're doing with the Youth Futures Project. The only thing that I would like to add to this was one of the reasons why I've always like enjoyed and appreciated the work that Quest does is Quest, I don't know how you guys do it, but you manage to, I don't know how to even describe it, like think of sort of big ideas, but also see those ideas implemented in the ground. I mean, I see one or the other. I see people who work on the ground and they are so enmeshed in the day to day sort of thing of it, and you get lost in that. And that's important work, don't get me wrong, but then sometimes the bigger vision gets lost. And then they have other groups who have like wonderful visions, but they don't have that interaction with the ground. I have always felt Quest manages to sort of bridge that gap really well. So anyway, let's start with either of you talking a little bit about giving us a sense of the context within which you work, and then we'll move on to the work that you're doing with the Youth Futures stuff now. So I don't know, let's go backwards this time. Let's go Tanvi, let's start with you, and then kick it off to Bhavna.
Sure. So Quest primarily works in the secondary schools and with so that's really learners in grades 8 to 10, and we work in 5 states across the countries. And these states also vary, that there are states like Karnataka, Gujarat, which are seen as more industrially developed states in the country. At the same time, we have states like Orissa, which can be seen as a little more economically weaker as such in the country. Um, and annually, we almost reach out to around 7 lakh odd learners. A lot of these education spaces that we work with I mean, it's a mix of both remote and urban spaces, but just to kind of give us the audience a flavor of what these spaces look like, if, we were actually compiling some data the other day, and in states like Jharkhand, we realize, and a lot of the schools that we work with are actually single teacher schools, right? So um, uh, where there's a paucity of teachers, classrooms, and multi-grade teaching is happening in a lot of these spaces, and therefore, what is the kind of learning environment that's available to learners, right? And these are challenges that teachers face on an everyday basis. So, these are practical realities in which we operate. At the same time, I think the other part of our work is where the skilling institutions, the industrial training institutions that the government of India has set up. Our focus really has been, as I was mentioning, with the public education system, because public education system over the years, what has happened in India is that a lot of, as families have grown and progressed economically, they've also been abandoning a lot of these public education systems, right? So as soon as family reaches a particular level of prosperity, the first thing that they do is to move kids out to private institutions, right? So a lot of um, so therefore these public education systems also end up serving a lot of um, um, underserved communities, or who have historically or been marginalized as such, right? And that's why one of the focus for Quest has been to kind of look at that ecosystem, because those are the gaps we're kind of trying to fill. Um, with In the skilling ecosystem, we primarily work with 8 focus states. These are again states which are either where the jobs are, or these are states where a lot of the youth are, but again, no local job opportunities available, right? So they've struggled for some of them, say, look, in places like Assam or Bihar, is really to kind of try and find employment after, even after doing a very specialized course from an ITI, they still struggle to kind of find jobs. On the other side, there are ITIs in more industrially advanced regions where youth are enrolling, but again, finding that the kind of jobs available to them after they graduate don't meet their aspirations, because again, aspirations are also growing, right? So there's this mismatch between where the jobs are, where labor forces. So those are some of the kind of environments that we are working with. I'll stop here and see Bhavna
Sure.
in case you
Yeah.
want
So,
to go ahead.
Bhavna, if you can build on that for sure. But I think one of the pieces that is interesting about some of the work that you've done is also look at sort of the out of school sort of context within which these kids are working. I mean, the reason I mentioned that podcast is because this first episode with this is this two young people talking about how hard they're trying. They're trying YouTube and this and that somehow to break through. And it is just it's heartbreaking at some level to listen to their energy. And when in the end the host asked them like, what do you think of the future, they are actually not like, even though they're working, I mean, I can't imagine working harder to build a future for yourself, to actually not have an answer to that question. And so maybe, Bhavna, I let it, I shouldn't guide it too much. So say what talk what you want
No,
to
no,
talk
no.
about.
No, that's actually a point that I wanted to make. So, what we have seen on the field, I think I've met around 1,000 students in the last 3 years in our through our research projects, and what I've seen that on the field, every young person, they're trying really hard. They are doing the best they can with the resources they have at hand. They're using their books, they're talking to their teachers, they're trying to find mentors even on social media, because now digital access is something that they're getting in even remote parts of India. They're trying to find mentors on social media, and that is sort of making them fall into the traps of disinformation as well. But they're not they're not trying to fail themselves. They're doing everything they can, but there's a narrative at a systemic level that this generation is lazy, they don't want to work hard. There are many jobs, but they're not working hard to get them or achieve them or reach them. So through my interaction in the last 3 years, this is what I've noticed, and I think this is what I feel my work is also about, to sort of bring out these complex lives that young people are leading in India. The struggles they have, the negotiations they have, like what Tanvi was also saying, that The moment a family is doing economically better, they put their children to private schools. But even in that boys get that access way more than girls do. So what you see in government schools is that there are more girls there who have big aspirations of becoming IAS officers, IPS officers. Government job is still an aspiration in India because that gives you security, dignity, which you will not get in a private job when you're earning 8,000 rupees a month, which is what a lot of these students, or they see the people around them ending up in. Like, for example, in Jharkhand, one of my first field visits through Quest, we were talking to this child called Ruben who was in eighth grade. He had worked in a brick kiln to for like months to then earn enough to buy with a friend a phone that he could access, so he could learn about math, integers, etc. Because he didn't his the teachers he had in his school were, I think there were three teachers, out of which two were not coming to school every day or something like that. So he bought that phone to go to YouTube, learn himself. But what he said really broke my heart when he said that, I think I can try to finish 12th, but after that I know for sure that I won't be able to go further than that. And the people he had seen around in his village were working in stone quarries or mines. So that is what they grow up seeing, right? So even if you have big aspirations of being an army officer or IPS, the reality is such that you somehow know that you won't be able to reach. So I don't know, like, that is the failing of the education system right now, right? You're maybe through YouTube or whatever, you're seeing these aspirations, but your reality is so different that you don't know how you will reach there. And the education system is not giving you those resources to also even at least have a fair attempt at that aspiration.
All right, so this is going to be my last question before we open it up. And so I'm going to transition a little bit to this new project, Bhavna, that you're leading and the work that Quest is doing, which is this Youth Future Studio, which I think again goes to the point I made earlier about Quest being able to have this bigger vision and then take it to the ground and try to sort of see what impact that has. And so you guys are looking at sort of mega trends like climate change and AI and what it means for young people. And I just want to underscore something here, which is very often the most of these conversations about climate change or whether, these mega trends, advent of AI, happen so much in the global north and it is sort of influenced by that. But the long tentacles of things like climate change or of algorithms that are being determined by a bunch of people sitting in Silicon Valley go all the way down and tap the shoulder of young people sitting in Kurda. I mean, that was what your story really made apparent to me. And for all of us, one of the things common to all of us hosts here is that we all work in the field of ed tech. And there was this part in your story where you talked about that there is technology in the school. There are smart boards and there is computers and so on, but they are not influencing people's learning as much as what they are seeing from channels outside of school. And that really stood out to me. So tell us a little bit about this Youth Futures Studio, what you're seeking to do through that, and what sort of some preliminary things that you're finding, and then we'll open it up to the others to ask some questions on that. Either of you can go first, and then other can chip in and fill in.
Sure. So what happened was, I think 4 years ago, Priyanka, who has been on another podcast, another episode, her and I had gone to the field to understand what is informing young people's aspiration in government schools and industrial training institutes. And we started with Assam, a state in the northeast in India. And it was right after there were big floods in 2022, I think. And it was right after that. So when we went there and we started talking about the future, what we realized was a lot of young people were feeling very anxious because they had spent 1 month living on embankments and not going to schools when it was school time because of the floods. They didn't have, or they weren't articulating that as climate change, but they were saying that floods make me feel dirty. There's no electricity anymore. I get bored. I'm not able to go to school. Uh, Things like that. And this is what made us realize that even thinking about the future is a skill. And young people need to feel that they have agency to shape their futures, rather than feeling that whatever decisions are being made for us, we just have to passively accept them. That sort of took us to this through this journey of building something that we're calling futures thinking pedagogy. And our climate change project was the first one which we tried this on, where we made young people understand the systemic causes of climate change. So what our curriculum does is it talks about climate change in very simplistic terms, right? There's pollution, there's environmental degradation, and how do you solve it? You stop taking private transport, so you take public transport, you do rainwater harvesting, you close taps, you don't cut trees. But that doesn't really translate to young people's lived experiences, right? Like in Assam, young people are building boats with banana leaves and other whatever they're finding, because they have to move to maybe the market or etc. So public transport or private transport is not the conversation they're having, right? So the curriculum is so disconnected with their lived experiences, that their understanding of climate change, even though they have lived realities, they're not able to articulate it like that. So we made them understand climate change from a systemic lens. We made them understand how it's unequal in what is causing climate change as well. Like for example, some young people through our interaction also told us that everyone should plant one tree in their house, and that will solve this problem. But then we started talking about, okay, there are these big industrialists in India, and then there is your neighbor. Do you think they have the same role to play? Do you think they have the same impact on climate change? They're going to be impacted by climate change the same way. And that is what made them realize, okay, so it's distributed unequally, and therefore the action also needs to be taken unequally, taken differently, basically. And through that engagement, what happened was a lot of young people started feeling angry, and they started articulating and realizing this is wrong. What is happening with us is wrong. Why is this not being taught to us in schools? And they went a step further, where they started saying, why is this not an election agenda? Because election was also happening around that time, and they started saying, why are we not told about this? Why are our communities not being made aware? What are the policy level decisions that are happening? What is the government doing? Why is this not an election agenda? So they started becoming those active citizens as well. And in Assam anyway, there are student youth groups who are working on environment preservation, because they are closer to nature. They are not, the state is not as industrialized as the other states in India. So this is what sort of made us build this pedagogy, and we sort of realized that there is some merit to how young people are moving from passivity to feeling like they can take action, or that they can be empowered with agency, and they started thinking of these mega trends from a systemic lens. So from climate change, then we sort of shifted gears to digital lives and AI, because as you said, there are many tech products that are being pushed into the education system. There are smart boards, there are apps, etc., etc. But they're very disconnected from what young people are doing when they go home. So whatever they're learning on their mobile phones, or if they have access to a laptop, that is not being talked about in their classrooms. So we started understanding what their digital lives are, and we realized that it's very complex, it's very messy, there is no guidance. Like, for example, almost every young child is using YouTube, and they are consuming all kinds of information that they're consuming, that they're getting. They don't understand, like a lot of school students in different states didn't know the word algorithm. They would use the word computer. They would say, computer is doing this. Computer knows what my likes are or what my interests are, you know. And some young people, more girls than boys, would say that uh, maybe there's a person behind YouTube who is assigned a certain district, and they're pushing out videos to us. And that is how we're seeing it. So what we realized, that young people were making these, folk theories, so to say, about how social media is working, because there is no algorithmic literacy, there is no data literacy, there is nothing basically. And algorithms are a kind of AI, right? And now we're pushing towards AI. The country is talking about being AI first by 2047, etc. And young people are going to be the ones who are going to build us or push us towards that vision, right? They're going to be the workers of AI. They're going to be the consumers of AI as well. And they're already using Gen AI in so many ways, with
Right.
Meta AI being there on WhatsApp, Chat GPT being there. So we also realize that, again, young people need to speak about AI from a futures lens. What is the future that they want to see in India when it comes to AI? What kind of roles do they want to build? Do they want to play in building this future? And that sort of moved us to AI futures as well. And that is what we're working on right now. So
Okay.
it's sort of built organically, but this is
Mhm.
how we're sort of bridging the gap between the mega trends and the conversations on the top and the
Sure.
conversations on the bottom.
So, just to add one little sort of data point to this, is one of the biggest transformations that happened in India was when the prices for cell phone data just crashed. This is Geo and Hotstar, whatever this is like what, 11 years ago. Huge transformation there. And now all of these companies are giving ultra cheap access to these AI tools in India, again, as a way of capturing market share and all of that. You can understand that. And so that's one of the transformational things that is happening there. So, Tanvi, do you want to add something to what Bhavna said? I know Chris is waiting to ask a question.
I think I can answer maybe that part of your question where you're talking about, Quest operates a little differently and takes these big bets. I think for us also, as Bhavna mentioned, it's been an evolution, but I think what helped this entire journey with YFS emerging as well, I think the ability, what it made us do internally also was to think about research which is outside the scope of projects and deliverables, right? Because as a organization that is funded typically with funds from donors, it comes with a particular timeline on in which those funds need to be utilized, or there is a deliverable that is needs to be kind of delivered by a certain date, etc. I think the freedom to actually spend the amount of time and energy that this team did on the field, just letting the discovery happen, and then therefore emerge with a pedagogy and a framework to kind of work with young people to get them to kind of understand some of these things which are happening to them and how they're shaping the future. The I think, and that's something that I think, and the organization therefore accommodating and making the space for some of that is something that I wanted to kind of highlight. I think it's something that um, yeah, it requires a certain environment in which some of these things can emerge, right? So I just wanted to bring that point in.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, you're on.
So I've been wrestling with how to help people uh, visualize their own futures and act on them for literally 55 years. And if I were going to give, the one paragraph summary, people of every age are caught in thinking about the future by a tension, the dead hand of the past and the living hand of the present. So the dead hand of the past shapes a lot of what's possible in the future. And, the saying, those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it, is pretty accurate. But the present has new things in it. And if anything, the present is accelerating in terms of the number of new things that it has in it. Good and bad things. The pandemic, but also the development of online and hybrid infrastructure, generative AI with a lot of poor applications, but also some promising directions, the rise of authoritarianism across the world, and so on. And those things that are different than the past open up new possibilities for the future. They're capable of breaking through, the ceiling that the dead hand of the past has put on us. Now, what I have experienced also is that in general, there's an age difference. People who are older, who've been around for a while, know more about the past, but they also are less imaginative about the future because, having tried to change things and not succeeded, they see a lot of glass walls in their mind that may or may not be true. Younger people, when they're empowered by a program of the type that you have, are very creative and optimistic about the future, which is great. But some of that creativity needs to be tempered by, the very real realities in the world that are still with us, even given all the changes that the present is shaping. And so I'm wondering to what extent you do cross-generational thinking, because in a way, the strengths of younger people and older people complement one another. If you can get them talking where both sides have respect for the other, and I understand that often adults just don't feel they can learn anything from kids, which is far from the case. So I don't know how you feel about my way of framing this, or also whether the kids have cross-generational opportunities.
So just to add, Tanvi, I was looking at the question that you had dropped in there, which I think relates to what Chris is saying, because you had talked about the fact that even Bhavna and you come across it with slightly different aging and framing. So I think this feeds into that question as well. So it's a very opportune question by Chris, I think. So I'll let you guys jump in.
Okay, I can go for this. So, Chris, we have for till now we have only worked with young people on using this framework and having them move towards thinking of multiple futures and desired futures. But we also realized that that is not so. Young people don't have decision making power as of now. So it's very important that these dialogues happen in an intergenerational format, and what we are now thinking or moving towards is to see how can we build those conversations with people who are from different generations, and they're talking about these larger mega trends and thinking about futures in a different way. Because what you're saying and how people who have been here for longer, they obviously know the past more. Like, for example, even with Tanvi and me, when we have a lot of conversations, even when I'll bring some new idea and I'll be very jumpy and excited about that, and Tanvi will tell me, okay, we did this in the past, this was done by this organization, this has been done there, etc., etc. And that actually makes me think more, go to that resource, try to figure it out, how will I do it differently. So I do see value in this, and we do want to move towards doing those intergenerational conversations. I right now don't know how to operationalize that. We will do some trial and error and figure it out, because the vocabulary in which young people speak and the older people speak is also very different when it comes to technology. So we'll have to figure that out, especially with the young people that we are working with and the parents, their parents in the generation and the background they come from. It's going to be a tough task, but we definitely want to try that because we know something good will emerge out of it. But Tanvi, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I was actually reminded of our weekly catch-ups and our conversations there. But no, I think maybe stepping away from YFS, I can maybe talk about a little bit, draw from our programmatic experience. So one of the things, especially in schools program, that we do is to get uh, learners from secondary schools to actually come together and undergo a process of ideating on issues that they care about, and then through that journey get them to kind of prototype, iterate, design using technology, design something which is addressing a particular problem, right? um, I think one of the things that we realized over time was also the benefit that they drew from having mentors then available to them to actually take their ideas and convert them into tangible prototypes, viable prototypes as such, right? And I mean, when Chris was talking about intergenerational learning, that's something that came to my mind immediately, right? How do you take that energy that you have, but couple it with guidance, mentoring, etc., and then help them, bring their ideas, bring their energy to fruition. So that's one example that I could think about of what we're trying to do.
So you talked a lot about your journeys, each of you, to Quest Alliance. And, we're all on journeys. I mean, Lydia could talk about her recent journey ending up in Toronto. All of us could describe where we've come from and maybe a little bit about where we're headed. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what attracted you to Quest Alliance. What are some of the key things that that other people who are now currently looking for positions might learn from or aspire, to seek out organizations like yours, because I'm sure it's very fulfilling in what you're doing and what you're seeing on the ground happening. Um, Pawna, you talked a little bit about research. Could you also describe what you meant by research? What research are you doing? And is it casual research? Is it official? Is it something you've been trained to do? Is it something you've been assigned and you had to learn how to do? So you've been learning on the job how to do research and what it means, and what kind of reports come out.
Sure. So I was trained in something, I was trained in social design. And a big part of social design is something that we call design research, which is understood in different ways by different people. But how I understand, and sorry, one more point. And there's another term that we use in our social design field, which is called design justice. So we speak about how design has to center the communities that you're working for and not any other stakeholder. And one has to listen to the communities and understand their needs in their lives and then jump to intervening. So intervention is not the first sort of action that you take, but it's understanding the community. So there's ethnography involved, there's a lot of primary research, interviews, etc. And that is why I think maybe Punya said, do you call yourself a journalist or do you call yourself a researcher, etc. So that is sort of the line that I sort of walk on. The kind of research that we do at Quest is more ethnography. It's more like immersing ourselves into the context of young people as much as we can. Uh, but that said, the training I got at my master's did not prepare me for this. Like the small nuances that you learn on the field, like how do you talk to a person whose first language is not Hindi, but they are trying to speak in Hindi, for example. So how do you understand those body language cues? How do you get them to feel comfortable? Because I am an outsider at the end of the day, and I have grown up in a metropolitan, and then I'm going to a very remote place and trying to understand other people's cultures, etc., etc. It feels, in so many ways, it feels extractive. Sometimes it feels wrong, and that is why I think the action research that we do, where we are also building certain frameworks and taking young people through that, I think that sort of is also our way of giving back to them. So I think those things, those tensions that we hold, that we learn through research when we talk to young people, their parents, their teachers, etc., that is something that I was not trained in, for sure. That is something that I am still learning on the field. I have bad days as well when I go and students are not talking and I feel very off because I do see myself from their eyes. So those things obviously I wasn't trained in.
So, Tanvi, you are in charge of sort of overall evaluation. So you're looking at research in a sort of a different way. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that, because I think Quest does both of those things, right? So it'll be programmatic evaluation kind of stuff.
Sure. Yes. So I think um, from a program lens, I mean, obviously, we are trying to work with public education systems. So therefore, through evaluation, figuring out what works at scale per se, right? How do you, while we may have certain things which work in a small, in a very specialized environment, but how do you then convert that into something that may be applicable at scale with different people leading? So, for instance, where say I was describing the ideathon hackathon process that we try to do with learners. How do you convert that into something that teachers with a little bit of training and support can actually try and do it at scale with a little bit of learners, and how effectively are they able to do it? So a lot of the programmatic evaluations are designed from the lens of trying to see what's working, what's not working, how do we make it better, and then if it's working, then how do we use that evidence to then also build awareness capacity, advocate for certain things in the public education system. So really, evaluation kind of is trying to build that evidence to say certain things work, and therefore how do we get more people behind those particular ideas and take them forward. Apart from that, I think there's other researches that we also do, which is a little different from what BIFS does, which may also be more closely associated with the program design. So what I was trying to say was that, say, one of the things that we want to do now was to maybe look at how, especially for the skilling ecosystem, I spoke about the demand supply gap, right? So we did a study last year to kind of understand what do industries really think about ITI graduates. Um, are they willing to hire, and is there a reason why salaries are so low, right? I mean, is there, I mean, apart from pure market capital reasons, is there a particular skill gap that the ITIs are not able to kind of bridge, which is why ITI graduates are suffering from a low perception on what they are capable of, and how do you then fix that perception issue that exists in the market or with ITI aspirants themselves, right? So some of the researches that we also do are more formative in that sense, saying that, okay, how do we try and understand the environment in which we are trying to implement some of our programs a little better. And some of our researches are then focused on unpacking some of these. I don't know, Chris, if no, sorry, Kurt, you had asked us a question on what Quest is up to, and what kind of work are we doing, and if people who are looking to join us, what kind of opportunities might be available. Maybe I can talk about that a little bit. So as I was mentioning, we work with around 12 states, so we have a wide footprint. I think what is unique about Quest, and Punya touched upon that, is that there is the opportunity to shift things at a scale level, right? So while there are a lot of these, there is both the space to innovate and try and do something different, but also when these ideas are good, they can be scaled up because you have the credibility, the pathways to policymakers, to the governments who can take your good ideas ahead as well. So I think that's the fun part of it, saying that there is freedom to experiment, and there is then the ability to actually convert some of that into change that hopefully we are all looking to aim for. So yeah, I think that's, I would say, is what has kept me with the organization, that blend of uh, uh, depth and the opportunity to scale.
So there are pilot programs, there are new initiatives, and then that if they're successful, there's a potential for scale, which has been talked about on this podcast show many times. And Chris actually has a book related to that, the scalability issues. So just briefly, a follow-up before Lydia jumps in here. We are all coming from the educational technology, educational psychology space. And many of the people who listen to this broadcast of Silver Lining for Learning, this episode 252 apparently, will be folks in the educational technology space or educational curriculum space. Do you have people who are designing the curriculum that you talked about? Do you have a lot of folks who are doing pedagogical design, crafting new curriculum, as well as instructional technology, maybe creating online course experiences and that? Could you speak to that? For sake of people who are listening here, wondering what kind of opportunities exist in their pathway.
Yes, absolutely. We do have learning experience teams situated in both the programs. There's one learning experience team which focuses on the youth skilling and immerses itself into that ecosystem, and what do young people who are looking to transition into work or higher education, what kind of learning experience would make most sense to them. And then there is within the schools program, a parallel learning experience team which is looking at the age group of 14 to 18 primarily. So yes, I think, and at the same time, we also have as you mentioned, we as Quest as an organization, definitely EdTech has been right from the our inception been a core focus for us. We do have a technology team which and a flagship product called My Quest app, which is designed for learners specifically in the skilling ecosystem who are looking to upskill themselves on employability skills, trying to kind of understand what kind of skills will actually be relevant for them as they transition to the workplace. We've also designed, asynchronous learning experiences for educators on how they can actually implement some of the ideas on 21st century pedagogy in the classroom. Um, uh, we've have worked with state governments on designing specific curriculum. So in Orissa and in AP, we worked with the state governments to design AI curriculum for learners, which is now kind of getting rolled out in public schools as well. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of opportunities in with the learning experience team, and I think it's specifically for the youth program, we're actually currently looking to hire. And if anybody's interested, please do look up our website. There are a couple of opportunities that are listed there, and we are actively hiring as well. I'll stop here. Bhavna, you want to add, please?
I think you covered it.
All right, Lydia, go ahead.
Thank you. I have to say, I was so excited to read about the Youth Future Studio. I personally been thinking a lot about this notion of technological determinism, especially in the space of education, that we always kind of just receive the technology and then we trying to like kind of make the most out of it in some ways and without sometimes even the power or the ability to questioning these pedagogical values that underpin this technology. Like just talk about generative AI. It's very clear a lot of this technology is underpinned by an individualistic model of learning, that learner interacting with their own perfect personal tutor and companion. And what about collaboration? What about co-design together? What about these, like, together imagining what kind of education technology that's fundamentally good for our community? So I was so excited to discover that you're doing this work with the youth. So I'm extremely curious, like, what are these futures that these youth are coming up with? What are they imagining and what are they designing?
So interestingly, when we were doing the AI futures work, a lot of young people felt very betrayed when they found out that AI is being used in hiring, or AI is maybe used to decide who gets what scholarship or who gets, placed where, etc. But when they understood what AI can do or what AI is capable of, one thing that some students in an ITI figured out was, what if we create, and this is something that exists in other countries but not in India, and they didn't know about it. So what they sort of came up with, what if there is a platform that takes voices of all young people from different parts of the country, and then AI is used to segregate and put it under themes, and then top three problems are voted on by young people and they go to the education ministry, so that so our voices are heard, and the ministry is then acting on our voices. And they thought, if this such a platform exists and it functions, and they said that we will own it, so young people are going to own it, big tech is not going to own it. They said, we'll learn how to build such AI platforms and then we'll make it. And if that happens, then maybe young people in 2047 will be happier, and they will be in positions or working in positions where they can actually, reach their potential. In another, in another instance, now this may be a little not as utopian or whatever, but so young girls in Jharsuguda in Odisha, 10th graders, they knew that after 10th they will have to drop out, because some of them had already, their parents had decided they're going to get married, so they had been engaged, etc., etc., at 16. And they were told that their only job is to produce children after 10th. So they when they heard about AI, and they're like, okay, if it's going to change the world and do all these yada yada things, can it just take away the idea of reproduction from us? Can it take that away from our bodies? Can it do it separately? And they called it baby box, and they said that we'll ensure that the sex of the baby is not found out, so that female infanticide is a thing in India. So they said that shouldn't happen. And can it be trained in a way where babies are put in these baby boxes, and we are able to at least do whatever we want to do in our lives, and girls are free and they can have careers, etc., etc. So that is what they were thinking. They were thinking this: if technology has to come, can it at least take away our burdens, you know? So these are two examples that are coming to my mind right now.
So I don't know if you guys followed that news that Albania has an AI minister, and it's a she. So there are things there like Alexa is always a woman, Siri is always a woman, helping you out as an assistant. So there's a lot to unpack there. But now that Albanian minister has 83 AI babies who are going to help other departments. I can't make this stuff up. Look this up. This is an actual news headline. An AI minister. That in itself was bonkers. I can imagine ChatGPT being a minister and hallucinating proposals, and ideas. And then now this AI woman minister is going to have baby bots who are going to help other. This is the actual news headline announced on TV by one of the ministers in Albania. Welcome to our future. Sorry, that didn't mean to hijack that part, but I just had to mention this. Kurt, you had another question. I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna say the first baby box that was in the news was right here in Bloomington with B.F. Skinner's uh, behavioral designs, a couple miles from my house, actually. I'm wondering, as we're talking here, we're getting some understanding of what's happening at Quest Alliance, but there is another level in which to understand things, and that is at the individual level. I wonder if either of you could describe one or two people whose stories you have collected in your research or you have heard about in your research, stories of impact, stories of difference, stories, some kind of emotional stories, stories of change, stories of transformation. Do you have any individuals, people that you've talked to on the ground in your research who've gone through some life change as a result of Quest Alliance, or at least Quest Alliance having an impact on them along the way, that they were very delighted to tell you their story? And maybe if you've collected multiple stories from some people because you wanted to keep tabs on them, and they might have graduated and moved on. So could you describe one or two or three people that we might feel a bit more about what Quest Alliance is doing on the ground?
Sure. I can share. I think one of the things that, as you were talking, was one of the stories that was coming to my mind immediately, and I have not personally interacted with this young person myself, but again, something that we did end up documenting because it was just such a remarkable story. So here in Karnataka, between 2019 and 2022, we were running a program which was focusing on getting more girls to actually think about STEM as a viable career pathway for them. And the idea, and again, like I mentioned, public education system looking, and there are, we know, while there are gender-based reasons why girls don't gravitate to certain types of careers, etc., education. As a part of this, therefore, the idea was also to bring a lot of role models to young people to show them what kind of young women who had done well in careers, to kind of get them to and just make it a little more relatable to role models who were accessible to them, who came from similar backgrounds, but then had gone on to do well for their lives. So I think the story that I wanted to share was of this young person who was studying in a government school, and the role model that she kind of interacted with was as a person from a radio jockey who would actually come from a Kannada education, public education system, and had then gone on to actually be RJ on a primetime drive time show, right? And I think this young person that we interacted with, who also actually the team mentored through our through 2 3 years of engagement in that particular school, came back after, I think, after actually deciding to go on to and to do her media studies, etc. She came back because she wanted to kind of do a little bit of a radio interview for her college, and interviewed some young people, some not young people, some people from Quest Alliance who were part of the journey for her. So I think just the closure of the story, I think it was personally very gratifying for us to also see that the young person was able to kind of draw a connection between what experiences she had and then what pathways she was able to pursue, and then her coming back and wanting to share her story back with some of them who were part of her journey as well. I think others, I think I would say, again, as I was sharing, um, one of the things that we try and do in the school space again is get young people to create with technology. And I think one of the young person that we worked with in Orissa actually got to do a little bit of a short-term internship with ISRO, which is India's space research organization. So I think some of these stories definitely are very gratifying to see how the exposure or the experiences that they have in school that Quest is able to facilitate, opening up a little bit of more opportunities, or just giving that direction. I think both Bhavna and I spoke at the beginning, the lack of maybe the direction that we had maybe made us stumble around a little bit till we finally decided what we wanted to do. And hopefully these young people who are going through these experiences now don't take as long to figure out what they want to do in their life, because hopefully they get something meaningful early on, and that helps with decision making.
We have a
I'll
couple of
stop here.
minutes left. We have a minute or two left. And Bhawna, you have a story or two to share with us before Punya introduces the next show?
Sure. So we've been doing this work at YFS officially for just 1 year, and I'll give you very small nuggets that I have from our work. So when we started doing the AI futures work, young people did not know about AI. They did not have any idea. They hadn't opened the hood. But we engaged with the same set of people over the course of two projects, different workshops. And in the second workshop, we also made them understand what the infrastructural harms of AI is. So we made them understand what data centers are, what ghost workers of AI are, what is data labeling, and what kind of rights issues are there in and around all of that. And through that, a lot of some young people, not a lot, found some AI courses that they wanted to pursue. They started, like, their interest was built in AI. They wanted to build more ethical AI, and then they found certain courses in their ITIs. They enrolled for online courses. They found some boot camps, and they did that. And through our engagement with these young people, we are now building the first youth AI charter as well, where young people are saying, this is the kind of AI we want to build, and this is what the kind of AI we want to see in India in 2047. So, and this is something that we are releasing actually in our event that Punya is coming to in December. It's called Quest to Learn. It's on AI futures, and we have two young people who we've engaged with through the course of the last 1 year who are presenting this youth AI charter, and they're presenting their vision of what they want AI to be in India. So I think that is a very small achievement that we've had in the last 1 year.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. And I'm going to drop a link to a blog post that I wrote based on a piece that Bhavna had written. And at the bottom of that are links to some of her journalistic writings. And I think what I've always appreciated, Bhavna, in having my conversation with you is sort of these conversations that that you have with young people, and gives us a window into something that often here sitting in the global north we do not think about. And what was very revealing to me, at some hypothetical level I sort of understood it, but how these algorithms can really reach down and transform what's happening. And I just wonder about, with the level of misinformation and all of that that's happening, WhatsApp groups, WhatsApp university, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just going to get supercharged with this AI in ways that, I've often talked about this, that when I look back on myself, back in 2020, but 2005, 6, when social media was erupting into the landscape. Which was the time of the Arab Spring. This was this sense of the next Gutenberg revolution and such a sense of optimism. And then when I look back on the sort of freaking ravaged landscape of social media that we live in today, and the way it has polarized us, split us up and fragmented us with the ideas of democracy and citizenship. And again, I don't want to make a very strong causal sort of deterministic relationship, but the fact that that has taken propensities that we have as a species to other and to do all of that thing and just supercharged it. I really don't want to be 10 years from now looking back and saying, Punya, you idiot, you missed calling this out again. And so part of my sort of thing right now is like really trying to point to that. So thank you for the work that both of you do in this space to keep us informed, keep us enlightened, and as well as, of course, helping youth that you work with. So introducing the next episode, well, Quest, I don't know, how long has Quest been around?
2012.
2012, yeah. So I think got to know Quest, I think around 16, 17 when you had the first Quest Alliance conference and I was invited there. That's where I also got to know people at the Azim Premji Foundation, and that's been a very fruitful, collaboration and friendships through that. So next week, we are going to do something slightly different in the sense we are going to look at an organization that is just starting up. They are just 1 year old. And, in the next 10, 12 years, I think they're going to be amazing. This is a graduate student at Arizona State University from Afghanistan who saw that 4.5 million girls were out of school, decided to do something himself, set up a foundation, worked with a local school, online school here to offer degrees, high school degrees to girls in Afghanistan. And so we will have three people from there. We'll have Nasir Kaihan, who is the founder and president of the Alekane Foundation, which means lamp for light. And then Ginger Smith, who is a licensed mental health counselor, and Laura Payne, who's an academic manager at Smart School International. These are the people who are offering these services. So it's not just classes and courses online, but also sort of mental health support and other kinds of life support that they're doing. Like I said, it is a project that's just kicking off. But when I found out about it and I had a chance to talk with Nasir about it, I was like, okay, you guys have to be on SLL, because one thing that we try to do really is showcase sort of good work that's happening in small pockets, because I think that truly is how change can happen. Thank you again very much, Tanvi and Bhavna, for joining us today. I know it's late, in India right now, it's past 8:30, I think. So thank you for joining us. And as always, pleasure to hang out with my co-hosts, and we will see you next week. Thank you.